Hey, how's it going, Warhammer World? This is Obsidian Anubis, and I'm back with another Ninth Age battle report. I know it's been a while, I apologize. Between holidays and traveling, I haven't had a chance to get many games in. But finally, I am bringing you a Ninth Age battle report. So this is a battle report that actually me and my partner did before the holidays, and I just never had a chance to actually finish it. So it's been like 3 weeks since we did the battle, so I don't remember everything exactly, so I apologize. But this is a campaign for gold story. This is the Empire of Sonnstahl versus the Saurian Ancients. If you haven't been following this uh, thematic battle series, I would suggest that you go back and watch the rest of the series. They're all known as the Campaign for Gold. Some of them have titles. Other than that, most of them don't, however. So for this, the background for this particular battle is the Empire of Sonnstahl has made headway into the southern lands, or the lands of the Saurian ancients, and they've come across a large river, which basically separates the outer forest from the more dense inner forest, which is where all the temples which have the gold are. So the Empire has sent a advanced army to go see if they can start crossing these rivers, and then to see if they can obviously find some gold. And then the Saurian ancients have decided that they want to stop this, which makes sense. You know, it's their gold. They had to dig for it, so it only makes sense that they want to protect what's theirs. So that's the idea before going into this battle. So this battle is based on the, what was it, 6th edition Warhammer Lustria book. So using that book, we rolled up a couple of different scenarios. So for the events, my opponent rolled 6, which is the monkey run. Oh, excuse me, I rolled monkey run, which means I got to add 1 to the dice to see if I could go first. And my opponent rolled lingering vapors, which means that all range shooting is halved for the first turn of the game, because there's still kind of like mists in the air at the beginning of the battle. So to go over my opponent's list, we both played 4,000 point list of version 1.3. So my opponent has 2 groups of 10 chameleons. You can see over here on the hill on the left. Next to that is a block of 20 Saurus warriors, and they have full command, and with them is a Saurus veteran. You can see their gold in the front left there. I apologize, like I said, this battle took place a while ago, and I don't remember what magic items he had. I'm sure he had some, probably the Tower Star Helm, and I'm not sure what else. But he had some magic items. Next to him is a Salamander, and behind him is a Thyroscutus. And then in the center of the battlefield, my opponent has a Skink Priest who has 2 spells, so 1 extra spell, and is the Lord of Shamanism. Next to that is my opponent's main block of 20 Temple Guard with the Cutter Lord, who is Pyromancy. And again, I think he had some magic items. I think he had the Egg of Quetzal, or whatever it's called now, if that's not what its name is. Other than that, I don't know if he had any other magic items. And then in front of them is 10 Skinks. To the right of them is another Salamander and another block of 10 Skinks. And behind them is another warrior group of 20 Saurus warriors. And in that group is another Saurus veteran, and he is the BSB, and I know he had the totem of Mixicotl. And then over on my opponent's left flank is the 2nd Tyroscutus and 3 Skyriders. And then for me, over on my right flank, I had a group of 5 Readers with Brace of Pistols. And then over on the hill, I had 10 Imperial Rangers. For my first block, I had 50 Heavy Infantry with Pikes and the War Banner, and they also have full command. Again, Pikes is a special item that was allowed for this group of scenarios. I think it's the latest Brush and Fluff video number 3, if I remember correctly, that goes into the more details about the specific items allowed for this campaign. But Pikes was one of them. They have a detachment of 10 light infantry with handguns, and then I also have 2 characters in that group. One of them, which you can see here, is Santiago, and he is just an Inquisitor with full plate, brace pistols, and he is the Ring of Fire. And then on the left side of that unit, I have my BSB, Cerro Talvego. He is the BSB, Blessed Armor. I think he has a pistol and full plate. Other than that, nothing special. And then there's a block of 20 heavy infantry with halberds, just as a side block there to help. In the center, I have another group of 5 Readers. These ones have Lance and Shield. And then I have another block of 20 heavy infantry with halberds, and that one has full command. And then my main block is 40 Conquistadors with pistols and the gleaming icon. And again, Conquistadors was a special unit allowed for the scenario. They're basically Imperial Guard, but instead of having great swords, they can buy pistols, which they did in this case. And then with them is my general, which is Antonio Baldera. He has the black helm, Hammer of the Witch, Talisman of Supreme Shielding, as well as full plate and a shield. And then over on my left flank, I have another block of 10 light infantry and a block of 20 state militia with full command. And in that state militia, I have Octavio, which is a wizard master with 2 extra spells of divination. And then finally, on my far left flank, I have 5 readers with brace pistols. So I have a fairly symmetric list. So overall, this is what the battlefield looked like. You can see the river going down there in the middle. So the scenario was, the battlefield for this scenario was that I had to cross the river, basically. So we did the secondary objective, where if you get into your opponent's deployment zone, you get 3 extra victory points, except for in this case, I had to get into my opponent's deployment zone. My opponent just had to keep me out of theirs. So they got the secondary objectives if I did not have more banners in their objective by the end, and I got it if I had more banners in their deployment zone by the end of the battle. So with the additional +1 from the monkey run, I got the first turn. So Empire of Sonnstahl, turn 1. So over on the right side, I just kind of moved up. I just moved to the edge of the river as I didn't want to enter it quite yet. However, I did send my readers around, and unfortunately one of them did die to dangerous terrain. So 1 horse down, 4 more to go. Over on the left side, it was very similar. I moved up about to the river. This group of readers actually did not cross the river, as my opponent has 20 chameleon skinks sitting there ready to fire, so I thought it'd be best to keep out of range. In Magic, I managed to get 8 power dice, and unfortunately, with all the changes, I haven't been able to get cards made up of any of the spells yet, so I just wrote them down here. So I managed to get both the Star of the Line and Scrying off on that left group of readers, the ones which are across from the chameleons, as I figured they needed the extra protection. But with that, my shooting was more or less inefficient. I only had a few handguns and bows. I didn't bring any artillery for this battle, so my shooting was basically ineffective. So this brings us to Saurian Ancient, turn 1. Alright, so my opponent's movement saw him moving up as well. You can see that the Sky Riders moved behind my pikemen, and they actually dropped the rocks, killing a few. The rest of this aquatic enemy kind of moved into the river, as they are aquatic, so no dangerous terrain there. And that's more or less how my opponent moved up. Moved up the aquatics into the water, just kind of moved the blocks to block on the other side of the river. And then you can see over here on the left flank that my opponent also moved the chameleons into the river. You can see the different beads. So the 2 blue beads are the 2 spells I managed to get off last turn on my readers. The 2 amber beads, those are just the the attribute spell. Well, I get for divination, so you get to roll 3 dice instead of just 2 for your leadership, and you can see that I put those on those 2 units. In Magic Phase, my opponent managed to get 10 power dice, and unfortunately, I don't remember what my opponent did. I think my opponent managed to get off a fireball spell, and I dispelled the other fireball. My opponent, I think, tried the radius, where it has like all units within a certain radius. That one I dispelled, but they did get off the regular fireball and killed, I think, one of my mounted readers with the lance and shield. My opponent also decided to use an encounter, which is a specific attribute for this campaign, which is again in that 5th edition or 6th edition Lustria book, Warhammer. My opponent rolled a 6, however, which is all as well, which means that nothing happened. This is, as you can see here, this is my opponent dropping rocks, and it looks like they killed 5 of my pikemen. And then my opponents started shooting. First, they managed to kill off 4 of my militia, which was okay, I guess. However, they also killed off 7 of my halberdiers. This is the halberdiers that were kind of guarding the conquistadors' flank. They had to make a panic test, and they failed. Unfortunately, my BSB was outside of 12 inches, so they ran away. And spoiler alert, they never rallied. They ran off the board. So I already am down 1 unit. Great. Yeah, so this is the reader, I believe, that was killed by the fireball for my opponent's turn. And then with shooting, my opponent managed to kill 2 more. they did, however, pass the panic test. And then shooting with between the spearbacks, or excuse me, between the salamander and the skinks, you can see managed to kill off 9 of my halberdiers on that left blocker unit, and then my opponent managed to kill off another 5 conquistadors. So overall, lots of casualties, and it actually is not over yet. My opponent still managed to kill, between the chameleons, killed 6 of my light infantry, but again, luckily because I put the divination attribute on them, they managed to have 3d6, so they did not fail the panic test. So that's a plus. Yay! But other than that, I managed to weather my opponent's shooting more or less. No, it was I weathered my opponent's shooting, but I definitely came through injured. It was definitely not unscathed. It hurt. That was a lot of shooting from the first turn. But hopefully, now that we're a little bit closer, maybe I can get rid of my opponent's shooting. So that brings us to the Empire of Sonnstahl, turn 2. So, as probably any sane person does, when somebody's shooting at you, you charge them and try to tackle them to the ground. Well, that was my plan anyways. So, on the left flank, I had my readers charge my opponent's chameleons. They stand and shot and managed to kill 2. I also had my militia charge this other block of chameleons who also stand and shot. And if I remember correctly, didn't do anything. Maybe they killed a couple. I think they killed a couple, but I don't remember. I also charged my conquistadors into my opponent's salamander, and you can see it stand and shot, and you can see a pile of dead bodies from once it killed. The 2 remaining readers charged the salamander that shot last turn, and it killed them in its stand and shoot, so they died in a blazing inferno. I charged the halberdiers into my opponent's skinks there in the river. They stand and shot and killed quite a few more, but at least I passed my panic test, so they actually did make the charge. Over here on the right flank, I actually didn't charge. I just moved my readers around and started shooting at the purple Thyrocuscus. In Magic Phase, I managed to get 8 power dice. However, I could not remember what spells I got off. I think I got off again, like maybe the Stars Align. I know I got some spells off because of those beads, but I don't remember what spells. Overall, nothing was damaging. All my spells were defensive, so I think all I managed to do is buff some of my units from possibly being shot again. I decided to use an encounter this turn, and I got 8, which was a carnivorous plant, which you can see here. It's kind of that yellow and red dot or square on top of the Star Warriors. Unfortunately, it was not a very hungry plant, and it did nothing. However, in shooting, my readers over here on this flank managed to kill the Thyrocuscus. With only 8 shots, I managed to get 6 wounds through, or 4 wounds through, however many wounds it has, and killed it outright. So I was very pleased and happy with that. That was definitely beneficial. In close combat over here, I managed to kill 2. My opponent managed to kill 1 more. I won this combat. My opponent broke. I chased and pursued and killed them. However, one of my horses also died due to dangerous terrain, so I only had 1 reader left. In this combat, my opponent killed a couple. I killed 6, it looks like. Obviously, my opponent broke. I gave chase and caught them and wiped them out. Over here, I actually lost 3, and I think I only killed 1 of my opponents. No, I killed 3 of my opponents. I think I won combat, but my opponent passed the break test. In close combat over here, I easily killed this salamander and just reformed, as you can see here, trying to goad my opponent into charging into the rivers where they would lose their ranks. So that brings us to Saurian Ancient, turn 2. Alright, so over here on the right flank, you can see my opponent didn't do too much except for they moved the Skyriders towards my readers. I think they were somewhat panicked in the fact that they managed to take off that Thyrocuscus, so they reallocated the Skyriders to go take care of them. Over here, my opponent did not take the bait and just kind of reformed the Skinks and Saurus Warriors, as you can see. They also turned the other Thyrocuscus to face my State Militia, which ran across the board last turn. In Magic Phase, my opponent got 6 power dice, and I believe cast the flaming spell that like hits all units within 18 inches of the caster. I didn't take a picture. They caused a few wounds here and there, but overall it wasn't too bad. They also decided to use an encounter, which was a Lashworm, which I believe they put on my State Militia, so it killed one of my militia. And then over here in shooting, I learned not to get a salamander in your flank because that becomes a bad idea, and it burned through quite a few pikemen. You can also see a lack of halberdiers. Yeah, my halberdiers I think were killed to all but one, which is the one guy you can see running away at the moment. And I killed one skink, it looks like. So yeah, that did not go the way I thought it would. I thought my halberdiers would run in, hopefully clear the chaff, and then that would leave my pikemen open to a charge to his Sars warriors. But that's not what happened. So that brings us to Empire of Sonnstahl turn 3. So I decided that since I didn't have any halberdiers, I might as well charge my pikemen in. I knew I'd lose my ranks, but I was hoping I could at least kill these guys and get into the enemy and maybe do something. Over here on the right flank, I charged my conquistadors into my opponent's skinks. These guys I was less worried about. They're stubborn or they have bodyguards, so I wasn't worried that they would hopefully break. They wouldn't fail break test, and if they would, they wouldn't have so as heavy of as minuses because they are bodyguards, so they wouldn't get the minuses. So I figured these guys had a pretty good chance of not running away, hopefully. You can also see I turned my state militia to turn and face the Thyroscutus, and that little round base about an inch in front of the militia, that is the Lashworm that my opponent placed last turn. In Magic Phase, I managed to get 8 power dice, and again, I got off 1 or 2 spells, but I don't remember what they were. Just a few boosting spells here and there. I think I also threw a couple. Nope, sorry. Yeah. I think I got off like the Stars Align or something, but other than that, nothing of consequence. In the encounter phase, I managed to roll up a Mad Cup fungal spore cloud, which I put on the Skyriders, hoping that my opponent would fail a leadership test, but on 3d6 that is not going to happen very likely, and of course my opponent passed and was now immune to psychology. So, yay for my opponent! In close combat, yeah, I easily managed to wipe out my opponent's skinks. Oh, so in the front left of this block, you actually see a priest. I have a 4th character, which I apparently forgot to mark at the beginning of the game. I have a priest. I think he just has a hand weapon and shield, and then no, he has a hand weapon. He has the axe of battle and a shield and heavy armor. And I also got off the prayer where I could reroll wounds, I believe, on this unit. That's what I did in my magic phase. So I managed to overrun and into my opponent's temple guard. However, I did leave my flank to a juicy countercharge from my opponent. So that's not really looking too good. And then over here, I easily wiped out the skinks with my pikemen and then overran into my opponent's Sars warriors. So that brings us to Saurian Ancient, turn 1. So, as I alluded to, my opponent took advantage of that juicy flank I left them and charged into the flank of my conquistadors. They also charged the Thyroscutus into my state militia. In Magic, my opponent got 5 power dice and cast a fireball, which blew up some of my light infantry over here on my right flank. I think they failed the panic test and ran away, and they never rallied, so they were gone for the rest of the game. In close combat over here, I lost 2. I did nothing to my opponent. My opponent had 2 in a charge. I had a banner and a rank, so I lost, but I was steadfast. I held my ground. You can see that little yellow bead, so also my wizard got off some type of divination spell, so they were able to roll 3d6 for the leadership test, and they passed. Which, by the way, I really like. Divination, I think, is my favorite lore so far. Of course, it's the only lore I've used for Empire, so I'm probably somewhat biased, but I do like Divination. I think Divination was a nice Empire of Sonnstahl lore, or path. In close combat over here, you can see I took a ton of casualties. Let's see, 4, 8, 11. So it looks like I lost 11 pikemen, and I took off, looks like the back row and a couple, so about 7. Yeah, I was steadfast, so luckily I managed to stay in combat, but I was losing combat. I believe my Inquisitor is in a challenge with my opponent's BSB at this point, and I think it was a whiff fest. I did nothing to my opponent, and my opponent did nothing to me. In close combat over here, I threw all my attacks at the Temple Guard, and you can see I killed off quite a few. This unit was 20 strong, and there's 8 left, so I killed 12. So that worked fairly well in my favor. However, my opponent, like I said, did get me a flank charge, but luckily only 3 rows could attack, so I didn't lose as many as I could. I actually won combat, but my opponent, obviously being my opponent, easily managed to pass all the break tests. I believe the priest is in a challenge with the SARS veteran in the purple unit, and I actually managed to do one wound to him. He did 2 wounds to me, but luckily, since priests now have 3 wounds, I was still alive, and I still managed to get hatred, so that was a bonus. So that brings us to Empire of Sonnstahl turn 4. So over here on the right flank, you can see I moved my bowman around. Oh, looks like I did rally those 3 gunmen, so I lied earlier. I did rally them. That was pretty much my only movement, so that brings us to magic. I got 6 power dice, and I threw 3 at the blessing that Valun's blessing, where you get the 5 of ward save, and 3 at Ullr's blessing, which gives you the reroll to wounds, or vice versa. Either way, my opponent tried to dispel 1 and rolled like 3 ones and failed, so I got both of the 5+ ward save and the reroll to wound off on this unit of conquistadors. In shooting phase, my archers actually did manage to kill the salamander, which I was surprised as it has skirmishing and I was rolling like on 7s to hit, but I did manage to sneak 2 or 3 wounds through, which killed it. In close combat over here, my opponent killed 5, 10, 12, and my Inquisitor in the challenge. I killed 1 or maybe 2. Either way, I think it was an auto break for me. I fled. My opponent elected just to reform, and they reformed like this. I didn't rally that unit. It fled off the board, so they were gone. You can also see the Skyrider and my 3 readers are basically just in a snowball fight. I'm throwing snowballs at them, they're throwing snowballs at me. Occasionally somebody dies, but most of the time nothing happens. And then close combat over here, I killed the remaining 7 Temple Guards, so there's just 1 left. And I think I put 2 wounds on the guy, the Quetzalord. And then you also see that the priest managed to kill the Saurian veteran. I was very surprised that my priest actually managed to do something other than die. So that was good. Of course, the reroll to wound and the 5+ ward save really helped. In close combat over here, I lost 2, and as you can imagine, I did nothing to the Thyros Goddess. So I was not steadfast, but I did pass my break test. So this brings us to Saurian Ancient turn 4. And unfortunately, I don't have a picture of movement, but mainly because there was no movement. So I'm going just straight to magic. My opponent got 7 power dice, and I believe the only spell they cast was the Beast Within off on the purple unit from the Little Skink Shaman, as you can see here. So I think that was the only spell my opponent managed to get off. That brings us straight to close combat. Over here, my opponent managed to kill, I think, 1 with the Thyros Goddess. I again did nothing. I actually finally failed my break test, ran, my opponent pursued, and caught me, and wiped out this unit, which was with my wizard, which was unfortunate. And then over here, I did manage to kill off my opponent's general, so I managed to take off the remaining few wounds on my opponent's general, so that was good. However, you notice that I'm significantly decreased in the number of models I have left. At this point, even though this was only turn 4, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, so we decided to call it. So it was a Saurian Ancient victory. I only had the 1 banner left in this unit, and it was unlikely that I was going to win this combat in the next 2 rounds, as my opponent was still in my flank and likely going to break me pretty soon. So I went ahead and surrendered to my opponent at this point. So my opponent had their first major victory at holding the Empire of Sonnstahl from getting their gold. So my opponent was fairly pleased about that. Overall, though, it was a really fun game. I did enjoy it. It was a very strange list for me. I didn't have any artillery, and I only had readers instead of having a unit of cavalry, which I usually do. But I thought it was a really great game. I think my opponent really enjoyed it too. The river dynamic really kind of threw an extra kink into the game, so I really enjoyed that. But other than that, I don't have too much to say. Like I said, this game was like 3 weeks ago, so I don't remember all the details about it, so I do apologize. Hopefully, I will be getting another game in this weekend or the following week. So hopefully, within a week, I'll have another game up. Um, at the very least, I'm thinking I'm going to be doing a brush and fluff video. So hopefully, that'll be up by the end of the week. So at least you'll have some content to watch, even though it probably won't be the most entertaining. So I do apologize. But if you guys have any comments or if you saw any mistakes which you could catch that I didn't make clear enough, please put those in the comment section below. If you guys have any ideas or any suggestions, also please put that in the comment section below. If there's anything you'd like to see, anything you'd like to have me talk about, go for it. As always, hit like and subscribe, and as always, game on.